Joining me today for all the chat, Benjamin Butterworth, journalist and broadcaster, you know, an all-round sort of lefty.
I'm your April Fool.
You are.
That's it.
That's it. I knew it was coming at some point. It's wonderful to have you here. Let's start again with the household bills going up. They're going to hit everybody, and that's the thing about inflation. And we saw this with energy bills. They hit everybody, and whether you're a millionaire or whether you're on the lowest income, minimum wage, or on benefits, you're going to feel this. But the reality is, these things hit people on the lowest incomes the most because you're spending on your basics, on your food, again way above the 3% inflation, your gas, electricity, your TV licence and things like that, and mobile phone costs. And yes, you do need a mobile phone if you're poor. I mean, you might not need the top of the range one, but you do even to make basic communication with the world. That it's a much bigger percentage of your outgoings.
I mean, it's a very important economic question because people on lower and middle incomes spend more of the money they earn than people that are able to save lots in the bank, and so it can have a harsher knock-on effect in terms of spending.
The economy. Well, we're told, but then that's where you've got the minimum wage. By the way, I did that in economics. Marginal propensity to consume is what it's called in economic terms. I don't know why it's the one thing I remember from 2 years of economics. Yeah, it's your likelihood that you will, when you've got that extra money in your pocket, such as we get extra money in our pocket these days, your likelihood of spending that as opposed to saving it. If you give extra money to rich people, they just put it in the bank because they don't need to spend any more. They've already got enough money to spend. Whereas people who are at the bottom of the economic pile, they're more likely to spend it. So that's good for the economy. So the minimum wage going up, the living wage going up, that would be a good thing, apart from the fact that businesses say they can't afford either. Yeah,
so today there's been the biggest rise in the national minimum wage in history. It's gone up by more than 16%. So the minimum wage in this country is now £10. One bizarre outcome of that is that if you've been to university and then get a job on minimum wage at, say, Tesco, you now have to pay back your student loan on a minimum wage salary, which just shows the absurdity.
On absurd interest rates as well.
Exactly.
Unless, of course, you've come from Europe and you've been pretending to do a course, so you'd have to pay it back at all. We'll pay for it, don't you worry.
Yeah, indeed. If you come from Romania,
always happy to pay for you. If you just come here and pretended to be a student, always
without
have to pay
speaking
your loan
English.
Back. Yeah.
You don't even have to speak English for those dodgy loans. But when it comes to minimum wage rising, it's a massive leap. And, for people on those salaries, 16% is a significant change. I dare say that with food inflation and utility inflation having been very high for years, this probably just gives them a fighting chance.
Gets them back to where they were a few years ago. And
Exactly.
That's the thing. And even when we've seen wages going up, I think about an average of something like 6%. Yeah, but if your wages didn't go up when it was 11% for a while by that amount, which most people's didn't, you're still kind of fighting to catch up, aren't you?
This is the problem with our economy. Wages in the last about 2 years...
Why are we agreeing?
Well, don't worry, I'm sure we'll disagree in a minute. But wages in this country have only started to go up faster than inflation in about the last 2 years. From 2008, they have been basically stagnant.
Oh, I wonder why that would be.
Meanwhile,
you're going to say immigration. That happened in all those years where we imported loads and loads of people to this country to work for very low wages? I wonder if that might have had an impact on wages of people here. I wonder. Answers on a postcard or give us a call, 0344 499 1000.
But I mean, lots of countries have had high immigration. Germany has higher immigration than the UK does.
How's that working out for Germany? Have you seen their economic stats?
But their salaries are higher than ours. We've had stagnation since 2008. And I don't think, a lot of times you talked about the train drivers. I'm afraid I disagree on that.
Do you think 70 grand is a perfectly reasonable salary for someone to drive a train?
What I think is that the problem with our economy is not people earning 70 grand, which ought to be a middle income. If this country had inflation relative to the cost of housing and relative to the unavoidable costs of living, it would be more like 50k than 38k was the average salary. The US, Denmark, Northern Europe, their average salaries are 40% higher than the UK. The problem in this country...
They're richer countries.
And we'd be richer. We were as rich as them.
You don't get richer by paying people higher salaries. You get
richer
you do. By...
We don't
Hello, welcome to the left and the right in this country, everybody. If we paid everyone £1 million a year, we'd all be millionaires and everything would be fine.
That's not what I'm saying.
Can anyone spot the flaw in that who's over the age of 5?
That's not what I'm saying.
It is what you're saying.
No, it's not. What I'm saying is if you have more money in people's pockets, more money is going around and an economy grows.
But where do you get that money from? You only have more money to pay people more if they are more productive, they're working more efficiently, they're producing more from the same amount of time, the same amount of input. You need to produce something. We don't produce anything. One of the reasons why wages may have stayed higher in Germany for a while is because they've had a manufacturing base. And actually, manufacturing was less hard hit than, for instance, the service industry, the hospitality industry, on which lots of our economy depends. And the trouble is, when people haven't got any cash, they don't go out to restaurants, they don't go to pubs, they don't get an Uber.
But that's the point. People have had stagnant wages, and so the amount of money they can spend on those things...
You can't just give everyone more money.
But hang on, but the argument doesn't make sense, because inflation in this country has not been caused by higher wages, which traditionally would be the argument.
That's true.
It's been
External
caused
factors.
by outside factors, right? And so what?
And energy policy.
And so don't tell me that in Northern Europe, where wages are about 40% higher than they are in the UK now, their economies do not have higher inflation than us. They are more equal than us, and they have had the wages go up at the rate that we had until the mid-2000s.
They have completely different economic bases in terms of what they produce relative to in terms of what makes up their economy. And actually, a lot of those countries haven't had the same kind of influx of huge numbers of low-skilled, low-paid workers, which we have had, because they've got a much more, say, if you look at France, like a much more structured economic jobs market and the like. There are lots of different reasons why different countries do well. All I know is that we were told for years that our economy would be booming if we had mass immigration. We've had mass immigration off the scale, mass immigration for 20 years. We haven't had a boom. No, we haven't. GDP per capita, per head of the population, has not gone up. It's not gone up. We've been absolutely stalled for 20 years.
When we opened up to new countries in Eastern Europe in 2003-04, we had an economic boom that lasted some years, and that was partly fuelled by migrants.
Our GDP went up, yes. But we had a load more people here consuming services, getting entitled to things like housing benefit and the like, but bringing down wages for people who are already here. Because what a surprise, if you've got a Romanian who turns up and a Polish man who turns up, who's living like 10 in a house and is sending his money home to his family, which is a very typical scenario, certainly in South East England, and they're able to undercut Mr. Plumber or electrician or builder or scaffolder and his wife, who are both working full time and trying to support a home, not living 10 to a house, then of course they're able to undercut, and that undercut people's wages. Look, I want to hear your. I think he's talking abject nonsense, and I'm being kind because I'm on the radio and I'm not using a word I want to use. Give me a call what you make of this. 0344 499 1000. Tell me what you rate in terms of these costs going up. Can we move on? Can we talk about, just briefly, the two-tier justice, two-tier sentencing council guidelines? They basically, at the last minute last night, they were supposed to come in today. They've basically said, well, OK, we'll drop them. This is ahead of the Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood basically saying, I'm going to bring in legislation. It can't be enacted until Easter, but it will have cross-party support to prevent this from happening, where you basically are going to treat people from different minorities and majorities differently. Clearly unacceptable, clearly against every principle of blind justice. But we've also got two-tier police guide, basically saying you need to treat black and white people differently. Now, none of this is acceptable to British people. We've seen two-tier justice over political causes, people's views in terms of what happened in the Southport attack last summer and the Southport riots. There's absolutely no doubt, I think, in most sensible people's minds who've been watching what's going on in terms of sentencing on freedom of speech issues, sentencing on people's what people's motives are for their actions, what incenses people, and now in terms of people's colour, their religious views, whether or not they're trans or not. This has got to stop, because once we've got a justice system or a police system where nobody trusts it, then it doesn't work anymore.
Well, you have to be careful. There'll be 6 police officers at the door in no time, judging by that awful story in the Times at the weekend.
I'm amazed they haven't turned up, and I make a terrible cup of tea, but you're welcome to turn up, Mr. Copper.
But I think, what is shocking is that, first of all, this sentencing change came in under the Tories. They didn't say anything. Now, was that because they weren't paying attention, or was it because they kind of wanted Labour to get in trouble?
They were apparently speaking, but there's a whole big confusion about, what was actually being brought in and whether it was having pushback on. But isn't the issue that we've got unelected, unaccountable bodies in the police and in the Sentencing Council and the just judiciary, and they're not accountable to our democratically elected representatives.
I mean, the argument comes from the judiciary that we have a long established that the Parliament doesn't interfere in a court's rulings, but that's not quite...
an individual
exactly,
person.
Yes. Which is why I thought that was such a ridiculous defence. And the head of the Sentencing Council wrote in fury at the idea that they would do that. Well, hang on. Parliament is sovereign. Parliament decides the bounds by which sentences can be carried out.
Parliament should decide the guidelines.
Exactly.
And with advice from the Sentencing Council. But doesn't it bother you if we say that we think this is even Shabana Mahmood, who pointed out, I'm a Muslim woman, I think this is unacceptable. Apologies. If this is basically wrong because it's racist and divisive, why are the people in the Sentencing Council who wanted to push this through and have only backed down because they know it's going to be overturned anyway? Why are they all still in a job?
I suppose on the one hand, you could say that, they should give their honest opinion. They should give their
I want to know what they think. But now we know what they think. Consider if it was the opposite way round. Considering if the Sentencing Council or police chiefs were saying, well, I think we should make allowances for white people in this country. I think we should make allowances for Christians or straight people, and that's what everyone would go, well, that's outrageous. So clearly you shouldn't be in a job anymore.
But, I noticed earlier, if the guidelines really do say exceptions for minorities, well, people that are both white British and born in Britain, both white and born in Britain, in London are a minority. So maybe the sentencing guidelines mean you'd get a more lenient.
But why should someone, for instance, minority, say, you're a gay man, okay? So have I just outed you?
Oh, now the whole country.
Have you kept that quiet?
It's been my closest guarded secret for years.
But do you feel that you're in any way facing difficulties in the justice or the police system because you're a gay man? No, I mean, they would never guess. Although, a couple of years ago, having said that, someone threatened to stab me on a train for being gay. I don't know how he guessed. And I did actually manage to get, it's quite difficult, a hate crime prosecution. Shouldn't he just be prosecuted for threatening to stab you?
Well, that's not how the law works. And he was, the whole reason was because he assumed that I was gay. So that was very difficult. But I have to say the police were excellent in helping.
I had two teenage girls threaten to slash my throat, and the police didn't think they should get a record. When warmly they managed to bother to identify, they didn't bother with the other one.
Yeah.
And their view, this a few years ago, broad daylight, absolutely just, she hasn't got a criminal record. Well, no, because you never prosecute. I made damn sure she had a criminal record because I want to know those people who've got criminal records, so next time around they can go, it's not the first time she's done this.
Exactly. And actually that was why I wanted the prosecution of that guy, because he was clearly going to do it again.
But it wasn't. Well, it doesn't count as a hate crime because I'm a white woman.
But the problem is that if police can send 6 officers to a door because some parents have asked questions of the school.
Written emails. Yeah. Apparently it was a lot of emails.
45 apparently.
What?
But
so what?
Exactly.
If I had a child, as they do, with learning difficulties, and I were only allowed to contact the school via email, I'd be sending a lot of emails.
But if police can find the time and resource for all those questions, then why, when friends of mine had their flat burgled and they sent them notices of where the charges were for the stolen credit card, they didn't even look up the CCTV and the location stuff had been bought on a stolen card. If police can't be bothered to do that, then there's a valid question of to say, if you ain't tackling burglaries and day-to-day thefts, then how have you got time for this
Let's not worry
stuff?
about emails. Yeah, exactly. Can I ask you, before we go to break, I want to talk about this major incident declared in Birmingham. 17,000 tonnes of rubbish has piled up over weeks and weeks of strikes.
There's no way to talk about Birmingham.
I'm born in Birmingham. I only spent 7 years of my life there, but I was born in Birmingham, so my heart is still there. But this ongoing bin strike, huge amounts of waste. Whenever you see footage, just people literally walking past, just piled. The whole pavement is just rubbish. We've seen there's been sort of a blockading by bin men unions, blockading of the dumps, so people can't take stuff to the dumps. We are talking about huge amounts of rubbish. Rats everywhere. The smell, it's just utterly disgusting. Look, I've always said, if lockdown had included locking down bin men, it would have lasted 2 weeks and everyone would have gone, no, we're done, we want everyone back at work, please. But because bin men were still working, people could cope, and basically taking your bin out, which is your highlight of your week for some people. But, this is just untenable to continue, isn't it? Yeah,
absolutely. And Birmingham City Council has had serious problems. It's got a huge debt from both mismanagement and a case about equal pay.
It's a total basket case.
Yeah, and, the reality of councils failing, and we've had quite a number in the past couple of years, is these services we take for granted but are essential to living in an area end up with 17 tonnes like in Birmingham.
But there's also this utter madness under this court ruling where, dinner ladies say that they should be paid the same as bin men. And So, you know, it's largely women in the kitchens at schools, and it's largely men doing the bin collecting. But saying they should be paid the same, and these employment tribunals sort of mass rulings, which are massively impacting in terms of back pay for thousands of staff, which I think are utterly absurd, both in the private and public sector. If you want to go and be paid what a bin man's paid, go and be a bin man. Or, I don't know, go be a train driver, get 70k a year. Clearly a job where you are starting later, you're indoors, you can work, for instance, school hours, as a lot of mums do with the work, do the ladies do that work, is going to be easier work in lots of ways, and preferential work for a lot of people over, you know, being out on the streets from 4 in the morning in the pouring rain and the cold, handling people's rubbish. Of course those people are paid more. If you want to go and get that job, go and get that job. I don't know why you should be thinking it's not equal or equivalent work. It's a completely different job. I
must confess, I would definitely rather be a dinner lady than a bin man.
It's just utterly bizarre. If you want the bin man's pay, go and be one.
But, you know, I think the problem here as well is that it's done retrospectively. And so, you know,
that's what's got them in the mess.
It might be nice in principle, but
it's not nice. It's
morally
wrong in principle.
It's completely unenforceable in practicality, because the fact is, you know, a lot of those, if women are on lower incomes, well, they're the ones paying the higher council tax. So think about how many women are struggling to pay the bills because they've got a 20% rise in their council tax or whatever it is.
But everyone's council tax is the same. It's not because you're a woman. It's irrelevant. It's what choices that women make.
Well, I mean,
it is about choices that women make. A lot of women choose to spend more time with their children. They earn less. A lot of them with men. Here's the thing: if you're not with your bloke or your partner, and they're no longer with you, and you're having to make ends meet, then you don't get those choices. Life is hard like that. Life's not fair. But it's got sod all to do with whether you're a woman or not.
I do think it's unenforceable though, because you can't just put potentially billions of pounds on a private or public body and expect them to find the money. It doesn't exist.
Well, they can't, as we've seen. I'd love to hear from you. If you're in Birmingham and you're dealing with this, I would love to hear from you. Maybe you're one of the bin men who's on strike. I'd love to hear from you. You don't have to give your real name. Do get in touch, 0344 499 1000.